Various kinds of token sales have been an extremely important part of the rise of cryptocurrency. Initial coin offerings, or ICOs, were a particularly significant part of the crypto boom that took place at the end of 2017. However, the unregulated nature of the ICO space has left the practice with a bad reputation. As such, new kinds of token sales have begun to replace ICOs. Initial exchange offerings, or IEOs, and security token offerings, or STOs. Recently, finance magnates spoke with Keinan, the founder of Keinan Digital Assets Lawyers, about the past, present, and future of the security token space. Keinan will also host a panel entitled The Present and Future of Security Tokens at the upcoming Finance Magnates Barcelona Trading Conference on July 10th and 11th. So can you tell our listeners a bit about yourself and the work you do and how you got involved in the cryptocurrency industry in the first place?
So thank you, Rachel. I'm just a little bit about me. I'm a blockchain lawyer and a crypto enthusiast. I started in this space early 2017, but actually I was always involved in the Bitcoin space and cryptocurrency ever since the Mastercoin, the ICO. And in 2017, I started working in the space. We had our first client who was an actual STO at the time where there was not, the term STO was not that well known. And then we progressed from there, doing working in the real estate tokenization space and working with other blockchain companies. From DAOs to blockchain for impact project, which I'm feeling very enthusiastic about.
Okay, and so you, as a lawyer in the space, you've had a lot of work with security tokens and securities. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yes. So I'd like to ask you a little bit more about that since you're appearing on our security token panel at the upcoming Barcelona Trading Conference in July. So this is something that has gained quite a bit of traction in and outside of the crypto space, but so far it seems that the proper regulatory structure to support these security token sales and the distribution of security tokens and even the ownership of tokens and the assets that they correspond to doesn't really exist yet. So I'm curious, what, from your perspective, what needs to happen on a regulatory level in order for STOs and security tokens in general to be properly regulated? What kind of regulatory structure do they need?
So, first of all, I agree that STOs is taking, too long to mature. Actually, we were one of the first that was involved in this space in early 2017. But let's see how we progress from there. When we started, there was no protocol. There was almost no, issuance platform or company that would deal with that you could go to do an STO. And there was no secondary markets. And even the one that said they're doing STO, the technology was really not mature. And today we're in a totally different place in terms of we see big financial institutions start to take interest in STOs. We see banks doing experiments on STO. We see the international organization like World Bank examining the technology. So definitely we've matured. There's a lot of company that provides issuance platform services, and there was also some secondary market that emerged, still not fully active, but it's a progress. As far as regulation goes, so we really need to understand that this is like international operations. So there's the US regulation, the EU regulation, there's regulation in Japan and in China. So it's all very different Of course, the US market is the biggest market. Everybody's looking about how would the US market treat it and treat STOs. And I think that um, first of all, we need to understand that after the 2008 crisis, financial crisis, then the Americans are very, very cautious about new financial instruments, and this is totally understood. Uh, but on the other hand, they also understand and see the potential of the technology. So in order for the technology to gain traction, in the US, the regulator will need to allow more secondary market trading, federal laws that would allow the trading of securities between states, of tokens between states and inside and outside of the US, and probably amending the definition of what is accredited investors, which is something that they are already working on. And in the Europe, in the EU, I believe that I believe that we'll see more STO coming from the EU, and secondary markets and technology that's coming from the EU. Just because I think that in terms of regulations, they are a little bit more open. Also from Switzerland. And it just a matter of time. I know myself like few very interesting projects that's emerging now out of the EU.
Yeah, could you tell us a little bit more about those projects?
So big real estate tokenization, one that I'm involved with, other that I've done but by other companies in this space, some still in stealth mode. In the US, there was just the closing of like an WeWork office building, just closed like a $65 million STO. So there's some progress. Yeah, we see things that are emerging. Also, like you have to understand that the STO space suffered like the whole crypto space from the crypto winter, and now that we're starting to see like the little flowers of spring emerging of crypto spring emerging, then the STO is getting like a backwind to grow again.
Right, yeah, that's an interesting point. But so far, I guess then the industry that you've seen these STOs take place in the most have been in like real estate and, as you mentioned, like a shared office space, or has it been a bit more evenly distributed than that across other industries as well?
There's a very interesting use case for STO in fund formation, and we've seen some. Spice VC was one of the first, and later we see Science Blockchain, and there was several others. Just don't remember the name, but there were several others VCs that were tokenized. I think it's a very interesting use case because it's allowed the limited partners within the VC to have greater freedom to sell the limited partnership rights to the other members of the VC or of the fund. Yeah, it doesn't have to be a venture capital fund, but of a fund, and perhaps in the future also outside of the fund and also to the fund itself. So if you on a traditional fund, you would be locked for a period of 5 to 10 years. Then on a tokenized fund, you can sell your shares back to the fund, or you can sell it within the other limited partners. So fund formation is very interesting use case. And we'd also seen some tokenization of artwork. Also a very interesting use case. So yeah, there's several use cases for that, not only real estate. Of
Right.
course, that startups want to raise money. Um, just
Mm-hmm.
because it's a very young space, and startups are having difficulties raising money through STOs. But I believe that in the future, when STOs is mature, that will be like the main way that you can raise finance for startups.
Right. So do you see, so right now, if I'm a startup and I need to raise capital, do you think it would be easier to hold an ICO or an IEO perhaps to raise funds than an STO, or is it sort of a struggle all around right now?
I'm not, I was never a big believer in a ICO, and I don't
Mm,
see the real difference between an ICO and an IEO.
yeah.
And I, beside the regulatory risk that you're taking with an ICO, IEO, then I really don't understand like the business model behind it. And I wouldn't myself invest in any one of those vehicles. I think like the utility token model hasn't really worked. As a lawyer, I had a opportunity to work on another project which doesn't use a native token, but uses like third-party token like Ether. So those projects which doesn't create a native token, I think that will be like the future of finance.
Hmm.
And then you can stake your you can stake tokens within the system, and then it's a kind of a complicated mechanism, but it allows you to raise money not through a native token. So I'm not a great believer in the ICO, IEO, and I think the only way that's the industry will mature is through a compliant regulatory issuance of or securities that will turn into a non-securities over time, or through crowdfunding or STO.
Okay. You mentioned earlier that, we're not, when we talk about security token regulation, we're not really talking about one blanket regulation for the entire world because there just simply isn't the structure for that. We've got regulations in the EU, regulations in the United States, and in Asia, et cetera. I'm curious if you think that any particular jurisdiction is doing a better job than the others. Like, is there any one place in the world where you would say, okay, if you're a security token firm, this is where you should establish yourself?
Yeah, this is a question that always come up. And actually, like on the project that I've been involved with in the STO space, I think there wasn't the same jurisdiction for each one. Each one had another different jurisdiction,
Mm-hmm.
and the reason to choose the jurisdiction was not you know when you're doing an ICO, you're looking for some remote place where you can hide, and would not, hopefully would not, you know, bear the regulator arms.
Yeah.
And with an STO, it doesn't work like that. The consideration are different. First of
Mm-hmm.
all, we look at tax. We want to understand that you maximize the tax saving. So we're looking about like where the investors come from, and if they're mostly from the States, then maybe just doing a simple LLC would be okay. If
Mm-hmm.
they're from other places, if they're mixed, maybe you would choose Cayman. The other things that we look for is like where can we open a bank account, because like
Mm-hmm.
there's still many jurisdictions that even with us STOs would not accept money that is affiliated with crypto.
Right.
So, for example, there's been some advancement in Switzerland, um, with banks. It's not that it's easy, but they're a bit more open than they've been last year
Mhm.
with bank accounts for crypto related companies. So Switzerland is a very interesting candidate also from tax perspective. It is.
Mhm. Yeah,
But
that's
it's really like on, you have to examine it on case to case basis, because there's no rationality to do like a Cayman Island company for purely US fund, for example.
right. And you mentioned earlier that you've done quite a bit of work with international regulators, and I'm curious if you think that it's possible that eventually there could be some sort of a global regulation for security tokens, or really for any aspect of the cryptocurrency industry, because as you know, so many things are uh, it's sort of a patchwork, and as you said, right now you can sort of choose which jurisdiction where to establish yourself based on your current needs. But do you think that it's, for one thing, practical to establish an international regulation for cryptocurrency? And for a second thing, do you think that it would ever be necessary?
So I think like you just that this is the you just hit the spot. You just this is like the big question, because if we learn something from ICO is how fundraising should look like. You
Mm-hmm.
know, you should be able to put a website out there and then accept funding from all over the world. Like this is how regulation should allow us to operate. But instead, we see like a lot of fragmentation.
Mm-hmm.
So every jurisdiction's got its own securities law, and it's getting worse. I want to be, frank with you. Like even when you see like those crypto laws, like laws that designed to allow cryptocurrencies coming
Mm-hmm.
out of the EU, coming out of the UK, coming out of Switzerland, each one is using different termination. So it's not, and the fragmentation only continues. So in one place you've got a utility token and a payment token, and the other one is a virtual currency and an asset token, and it's getting like it's not getting to the point where everything is harmonized, as you
Yeah.
just said that that it should be.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not optimistic about it, but I'm 100% with you that this is how securities law should look like. And definitely in the age of internet, where there's nothing that you do locally. Okay, you want to buy something on Amazon, then you go online, you press on and it doesn't matter if I'm in Israel or if I'm in the US, and I go online on the app, I'm buying something, it's in my house in a matter of a few days. So
Mm-hmm.
so this is how security offering should be look like, without limiting yourself to specific jurisdictions. I don't know if I told you, but I'm a curator of a group of blockchain leaders,
Mm-hmm.
about 110 blockchain leaders from the security token space. And what I like about this group is we have representative, I think, like in most countries, from Australia to the EU to the UAE to the US, different countries within the US. So like this is a very international space, and the fact that you have to consider specific regulation each time you're doing an offering, and how does it fit to the EU regulation of definition of accredited investors or qualified investor, and how does it fit within the each state within the EU definitely. So this is very cumbersome, and I'm hoping that in the future we will see more harmonization with securities law.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. Um, So kind of along those same lines, speaking of like harmonization and then globalization, there are some, members of the crypto community, some people who say that one day, basically everything will be tokenized. Like all of our real estate will be tokenized. The cars that we own will be tokenized. Smartphone data, everything. I'm wondering if you think that is likely to happen. Like, is that sort of a practical thing, or is that even really a necessary thing? Or do you think that blockchain maybe isn't the answer for ownership of assets ultimately in the future?
Yeah, first of all, I want to detach from the technology, from the underlying technology, which you mentioned, which is blockchain. So it could be a blockchain hyperledger, or I don't know, like it could be any type of DLT technology, without specifically naming the technology itself. So we don't know really like what the technology is going to be. But doing the tokenization of assets and like the future of tokenization of assets, I think like this could really be our future. And just because it makes a lot of sense.
Mm-hmm. So,
Tokenize specific real estates, you can short.
hey Z, hey
Yeah,
Z, can you hear me?
yeah.
Hey, I'm so sorry. I'm not sure what happened, but my Zoom just shut and then reopened really quickly. So could you back up a?
Okay.
Yeah, I'm sorry about that. I'm not sure why that happened.
So
But
you want to ask the question again?
sure, thank you so much. So I'm curious if you think that, there's people who say that sort of one day everything will be tokenized, like everything from our cars to our houses to our smartphone data, like absolutely everything. And I'm wondering if you think that is, uh, if asset ownership will, and the future of asset ownership and the future of blockchain are like inevitably intertwined, or do you think that tokenization isn't necessarily the answer for that?
Yeah, so first of all, I want to separate a bit from the underlying technology, whether it's blockchain or Hyperledger or any other, DLT technology, and just focus on the tokenization of the assets themselves. So if we have the right and the appropriate um, regulatory regime to issue those tokens and have them traded, then that exactly what would happen.
Mm-hmm.
So we will have multiple properties that are being tokenized, and then you will have devices on top of those properties, hedging devices, and um, and more financial devices on top of that, so you can like short a specific neighborhood and long another neighborhood
Mm-hmm.
within the same city. So that like the potential is really huge, and for something which is more inclusive, which has more participants within the economy. um, so we can definitely go that way, but it's just going to take some time.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Um, and we briefly touched on this earlier, and you said that you weren't really a fan of ICOs or IEOs. Um, and I'm curious if you think that, STOs have the potential to completely overtake those kinds of fundraising and token sale models, or do you think that ICOs and IEOs have a future together with STOs?
Yeah, so each of them has a pros and cons. The
Mm-hmm.
reason that I wasn't bullish about ICO wasn't only the regulatory risk, and of course I'm a lawyer, and so I'm very sensitive about the regulatory risk. But let's say even that, as far as regulation, that was okay. I felt like that the business model behind it wasn't that clear, and eventually, like most ICO, did not deliver the value to the investors. They were not successful, even
Mm-hmm.
even if we take regulation aside. This is why I wasn't so bullish on the utility token ICO model. Um, on the other side, security token is also not there yet, because when you take a token and you dress in with all the regulation that we have right there, then you get basically more or less the same security that we would have, on the old world, with the papers. So
Mm-hmm.
this, so regulation needs to take like a further step to allow for STOs to emerge, and I think that you touch a very important point, that there might be something else. Okay, there might be something which is not a purely STO, and is definitely not an ICO. Okay, which can deliver value, like real value to the investors, get them, enjoy the growth of the project and some sort of an equity.
Mm-hmm.
And on the other hand, it doesn't suffer all the cumbersome regulation of an STO.
Mm-hmm.
That might be, in my mind, um, a project which starts as a security and ends as a non-security.
Mm-hmm.
Those projects are very interesting. Of course, like it's very vague. It's the SEC, stated it a few times. It's and it's also mentioned in the SEC framework. But we still don't know exactly how those projects look like. They said that the Ether, is one of those projects that started as security, ended as a non-security. And I'm personally, you probably know, I'm personally working on a very large airdrop project.
Mm-hmm.
So, of course, that airdrops, there's no promise for any, equity, or it's not an investment. You're getting like something for free. But it's a very interesting model about how do you get more people engaged into this space, and how do you make, how do you create financial system and economy systems.
Yeah. Can you actually just tell us a little bit more about that airdrop project that you're working on?
So it's a open source, non-for-profit charity project named Good Dollar by eToro, which is, of course, it doesn't own it, but it supports and sponsors it. And um, it's there's you can go online and see the project. The project goals are aligned with the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, which is end of poverty, financial inclusion, uh, fighting inequality, very noble goals. And the way that they do it is by allowing any person on earth basically link to a wallet or digital wallet, and get some digital units which are not, uh, I wouldn't call them like a digital currency at this stage, but just a digital unit that you can do like a simple transaction with them.
Fascinating. Okay. Well, Ziv, thank you so much for your time. It's been such a pleasure to speak with you.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure to meet you.